Dungeons & Dragons. It's the most iconic of role-playing games. Anyone who plays them with any regularity has likely started out with Dungeons & Dragons, yours truly included. It was 2 decades ago when my sister heard me and my brother talking about the old Capcom game by the same name, and she decided to teach us how to play. That was when Advanced Dungeons & Dragons 2nd Edition was the latest and greatest edition. But in these modern days, we now have 5th Edition, which I am now going to teach you how to play. So before you can actually get started on playing Dungeons & Dragons, there's a few things you're going to need first, and I've grouped the different ways you can get started into sets. The first is what I like to call the normal set, which requires you to get one of these, the Dungeons & Dragons 5th Edition Starter Set. And as it says right here on the box, everything you need to start playing the world's greatest role-playing game. And it does include everything you need. It has a few pre-made characters, it has an explanation of the rules, it has a short adventure you can play, and even a set of dice. And it'll only run you about $20 or so. So it's kind of a good deal. It's not a really big initial investment if you want to see if it's right for you or not. But the drawback to it is that if you do go with this, you are likely going to wind up needing to eventually get some of the other stuff from what I am going to call the hardcore set, which requires that you get the Player's Handbook, the Monster Manual, and what I actually don't have myself, the Dungeon Master's Guide. You don't necessarily need all 3 of them. In fact, if you're going to be playing with someone else that already does have all the materials and stuff, you probably can get away with just having the Player's Handbook. But if you're going to be starting this on your own and gathering your friends and getting into it, none of you have played it before, these 2 are definitely the ones you're going to need at least. And the Dungeon Master's Guide, while not critical, is still a very good thing to have. In addition to that, since these books do not come with it, you're going to need to get a set of polyhedral dice as well. So, all told, each of these books run anywhere from about $30 to $50. So this could easily go somewhere from about $100 to maybe $200 USD, $100 to $200 just to get started. Because a set of polyhedral dice can go anywhere from about $7 to $15. This method is, as I said, it's for the hardcore, the people who are certain that they want to get involved in this. And it's a big initial cost, but it will be feasibly everything that you need. And last is what I like to refer to as the jank method, which if you're watching this video, you feasibly have absolutely everything you need to go. And it's that, you need an internet-enabled device. And the reason I call this the jank method is because you will be using what is referred to as the Dungeons & Dragons 5th Edition System Resource Document, which I'll include a link to that in the description. It is most of the rules that you need to play Dungeons & Dragons. It's missing a lot of stuff that's printed in the Player's Handbook. There's not as many explanations of how the game is actually played. There is also a few key rules that are missing, like how to level up a character, and all the different character classes only have one archetype apiece. Like the wizard class, normally there's a total of 8 different kinds of wizards you can play. The SRD only has 1 of those, so you're going to be missing a lot if you go with the SRD, but it's available for free and you don't have to pay anything. And there's also probably some dice roller apps you can use, so you don't even need to buy a set of dice if you don't want to. In addition to one of those sets, you're also going to need some paper, a few pencils, and of course, at least 2 friends to play along with you. So if you have all those things, together, one of the 3 sets, pencils, paper, and 2 friends, you are ready to get going. The quickest way to describe the gameplay of Dungeons & Dragons is like this. It's kind of like the old games of pretend we played as kids, except there's rules in place so things don't devolve into arguments of, no you don't, yes I do. There's one person at the table that's going to be taking on the role of the Dungeon Master, which is equal parts storyteller and referee. You have to know the rules of the game, and you also have to sort of move things along. The Dungeon Master is going to describe what's going on, and then you, as a player, will say what you are going to do, and the Dungeon Master will then think on what you say you're doing, and then give you the logical conclusion of what's going on. If at any time, though, it is uncertain whether or not you would succeed or fail, that is where all your dice are going to be coming in. So what I have here is one of the character sheets from the starter set right here. This is a human fighter, so it's just a dude with a sword. That's pretty much what he is, and all of your skills, which are mostly going to be used outside of combat, are listed right here where I'm running my finger up and down. You've got all your basic stats: strength, how strong you are; dexterity, how nimble and what your hand-eye coordination is like. If you're able to toss something up and grab it without a problem, you probably got a decent dexterity. Constitution, which is how physically healthy you are. If you're able to throw back beers or something like it's nothing, you got a high constitution. Intelligence, your book smarts. Wisdom is knowing that common sense and perception, knowing that throwing back a beer for breakfast is probably a bad idea. And charisma is your force of personality. So all the stats are listed usually on a scale from about 1 to 20. And each one has a modifier associated with it. And the modifier is generally more important than the score itself, which is why those are in bold, which is why those are the big numbers right here. Anything that involves strength, our hero is going to get a +2 to that roll. Dexterity +3, Constitution +2, Wisdom +1. He gets no bonuses to intelligence rolls, and -1 to Charisma. So he's either really dull or he's a little grating. And the way all these come into play is anytime you want to do something and it's not certain whether or not you would reasonably be able to succeed, that is when you're going to start rolling dice for it. Let's say perhaps you are going to try to knock down a door to a cabin that you find while you're strolling through the woods. You're going to use your bare hands for it. Let's say you're going to use your bare hands for it, just try to kick it down. It's something that might take a little bit of time, so we're going to roll to see if you would be able to get it done in your first, if you're in your first attempt. So we're going to take our 20-sided die, which I will refer to as a D20 from this point forward. You're going to take your D20, you roll it, it came up as a 9, and we're going to add our strength modifier to it, so we got a total of 11. Now, as a general rule of thumb, the GM, or the DM, is going to be the one that determines what number you have to meet or beat in order to succeed in the given action. And a further guideline to that is 10 is anyone that is reasonably trained or just has a natural affinity for something will be able to accomplish that. 10 is sort of like the base difficulty number for anything that you might fail at, but if you've got like something that gives you an edge at it, you'll probably still succeed. If you need both like natural talent and training to do something, you can bump that number up to 15. And if even the best of the best wouldn't be able to do something, you can just go ahead and up that number to 20 instead. But we'll say that this is kind of an old door, so it's probably going to give a little easy. And since he rolled at least 10, he rolled an 11 because he got 9 plus 2 for his strength. He just gives it a good firm kick, and it's out of the way, and he's able to walk in just fine. So he goes in, and this is sort of an abandoned cabin in the woods. There's no windows, so he had to kick down the door if he wanted entry. There's dust everywhere, and there's a disheveled bed. Everything looks dusty, dirty, like it hasn't been maintained in quite some time. There's a bed in the corner of the room, a footlocker at the base of that bed. There's a table that still has a couple of mugs and a plate of food that's now rotten sitting there. And there's also a fireplace that is filled with soot. That's filled with soot. It hasn't been used in some time. So after I, as the DM, give you all that information, you would then decide what you want to do from there. be it trying to eat and drink the old and disgusting food, or if you wanted to, say, break open that footlocker. So at this point, we'll go ahead and say you wanted to break open that footlocker. So you're gonna grab it so you grab it and you try to force it open and break off the hinges or what have you. Now, footlockers are a little bit harder to get leverage in, so I'm going to say that you need to get at least a 15 to break it open and see what's inside. Which, that's a 7, plus your strength of 2. You try with all your might to pry it open, and it just doesn't give. You're going to have to look around for a key somewhere, or find some other way to open it up. So you head outside, and you notice that there is a stump. There is a stump that was to a tree that was felled, with a carpenter's axe, with a wood chopper's axe sticking out of it. You go over and you decide you're gonna pull it out. That doesn't really require a strength roll, because it's kind of easy to take an axe that's stuck in the ground or a felled tree. You just pick it up, and then you decide you go back into the cabin. And you decide you're going to use the axe to smash open the footlocker made of wood. So, at this point, since you are using a tool instead of your bare hands to force this thing open, I'm going to give you what is referred to as advantage on this roll. And anytime you would have an edge on performing a task, but perhaps because you have an additional tool to help you, you then would roll twice and you take the higher number. So since you're using an axe to help you break open this chest, we're going to roll d20, you got a 5, and we're going to roll again, and we're going to take whichever number is higher. You got a 12. So 7 plus 5 is 5 plus 2, or 12 is 12 plus 2 for 14. 14 is the higher roll, which is still not enough, but you think you're getting somewhere with it. So if you wanted to, since you could reasonably keep trying at this indefinitely, the only purpose that rolling would have at this point is just to see how long it would take you. So I, as the GM, could then rule that, oh well, you got a 14, so you just keep working at it for about an hour or so, and then you manage to pop it open. All that's inside is a few changes of clothes and a bronze key. And you pick out the key, and you find that it fits inside the footlocker. It fits in the footlocker, and that was the key to the footlocker. So other than a few extra sets of clothes and a key that is now no longer needed, you have found absolutely nothing inside this cabin in the middle of the woods. And that's sort of an example of what play would be like outside of combat. It's just sort of a back and forth improv with dice coming up anytime there is a question as to whether or not you would be able to succeed. Combat is a very big part of what makes Dungeons & Dragons Dungeons & Dragons. It's a game that does have its roots in tabletop wargaming after all. So with all that said, a lot of the rules in Dungeons & Dragons do pertain to how can a character make another character deceased? How can they fight one another? Which is why our character's class is, quite simply, Fighter. Fighters are exactly what it says on the tin. They use a lot of different weapons, and anything they can get their hands on is, viable as a weapon. But things that are designed as weapons are much better weapons in their hands, which is why our character is equipped with a great sword and a longbow, as opposed to a ladder and a pair of pants with rocks in the pockets. And in combat, whenever combat breaks out, the first step is always to determine the initiative order, which is basically when everyone is going to be acting, whose turn it is. And the way you determine this is you get your trusty d20, you roll it, and you're going to add your initiative modifier to what you roll. And that's going to be your initiative number. The highest number will go first, followed by the second highest, and so on and so forth down the line until everyone gets a chance. So since we got a +3 to our initiative and we rolled 18, that means we would have 21. And let's say we have another fictitious character that has, we'll just say a +1 to their initiative instead. We got a 7 for that, and they got a +1 for a total of 8 initiative. Naturally, our fighter is going to go before them in the fight. And when it's a character's turn in the initiative order, they get a total of 4 different kinds of actions. They have their move action, which is quite simply they move their movement speed in feet. In that round, they can move up to that, so we can use our move to move about 30 feet in one combat round. You also have your standard action, which lets you use most of your class abilities, such as attacking for our fighter, or if we happen to be playing as a wizard, we could also use magic or something like that. There's also your bonus actions, which are specific class abilities that don't really fall into standard actions. Our fighter has the ability Second Wind, which allows him to regain some of his hit points, which allows us to regain some of our hit points when we use that ability. That is a bonus action, so if we were to get wounded in the middle of a fight, we could heal up first and then keep fighting as normal. And last, you have a reaction, which is not used during your turn, but rather outside of your turn, as you guessed, in reaction to what someone else is doing. Level 1 fighters generally don't have any sort of reaction abilities, but there are some wizard spells that can be cast as a reaction to what goes on around you. As I said, there are a lot of different actions you can make in combat for your standard action, but the most common one is attacking. And the way that works is, as with everything else that we've covered so far, you take your d20, and you're going to roll it, and then you add whatever the attack bonus for what weapon you're using. Let's just say we were using our longbow here. You add your attack bonus to that. Our fighter has a +7 to wielding longbows, so we would have gotten a 26 for this roll since we got 19 on the die. And then you're going to be comparing that to the target's armor class, which is not necessarily a number decided upon by the GM. It's based off of what your character's dexterity is and what armor they may be wearing. And it determines how likely they are to be wounded when they're attacked. So, a 26 is a very high attack roll. There isn't very much that has an armor class that surpasses that. So, this is very likely to be a surefire hit that would at least hit anything that is made against it. After that, this is where all your other dice come in. You then take the damage die for the weapon that you're using. For a longbow, it's 1d8 plus 3. So we're going to take our 8-sided die, and we're going to roll it. So 7 plus 3 for a total of 10 damage. So this means that after we make this attack roll, whoever we were attacking then loses 10 of their hit points. And at level 1, that's usually enough to take out just about anything. So, now that we've gone over, so let's go ahead and put all this into practice, shall we? Let's say that our fighter is continuing to trudge through the woods when he finds some small humanoid figure hunched over something, cutting something up and cackling with glee. This is what our fighter recognizes as a goblin. And upon drawing his sword, the goblin's ears perk up and immediately whips around and points his sword at our fighter. The fighter does not necessarily have the element of surprise anymore. So we're going to roll for initiative. First for our fighter and then for our goblin, since we only have one set of dice. So we roll. Our fighter got a 19 plus 3 on his initiative for a total of 22. It is very likely that our fighter is going to be going first. Our goblin only gets a +2 to his initiative, so we will roll. And he got a 3. So our goblin has a total of 5 initiative. So on our fighter's turn, he's going to go ahead and keep his distance, take out his bow, and take a shot at the goblin. So we're going to roll our d20. We got a 10, and we have +7 to hit with our longbow. So 17 beats the goblin's armor class of 15, and so we then move on to rolling for damage. So we're going to take our d8, We're going to roll it. We got a 3 plus 3, so we have a total of 6 damage on the goblin. He gets pierced right in, say, the abdomen. Not quite enough to finish him off, but he's definitely reeling and in pain at this point. But then our goblin, already having his sword revealed and knowing that his time is almost up, he decides he's going to go and take the suicidal option and run at the fighter and try to stab him. So we're going to roll for the goblin's attack. Roll a d20. He got a 1 with a plus 4. This does not meet our fighter's armor class at all. So he's probably got like blurred vision because of the arrow sticking out of his spleen, and he just misses entirely as our fighter steps to the side. So that's the end of one combat round. Starts again with our fighter going first. So he's going to instead drop his longbow and take out his greatsword, show him what a sword really looks like. And we're going to go ahead and roll for that. Roll the 17 plus 4 for a total of 21. That beats an armor class of 15. And so we then move on to rolling for damage, which is 2d6 plus 2. So we're going to roll this twice and then add 2 to that. Add 2 to that along with 2 dice rolls that we got. So we got 1 plus 3 plus 2 for a total of 6 once again. And 6 reduces the goblin's HP to -5. He is very much dead. And so now that the combat is over, the dust settles from the fight. The goblin is split in 2 from the greatsword going straight through his abdomen. And our fighter would then resume to a more explorative phase of the game. The fighter steps over to see what the goblin was cutting up and cackling at. It looks like a human man, or what was at one point in time probably a human man. And so our fighter decides that no one deserves to have their body just lying out in the middle of the woods, and decides to go find a shovel and give him a proper burial. Which then we could say is a strength roll to determine how fast it takes him to dig the hole. Let's go ahead and roll for that. 4 plus 2. It takes him quite a while, and it becomes nightfall by the time that he's able to dig and bury this poor man that was horribly butchered by a goblin. So, with all that said, that's more or less what a brief scenario of Dungeons and Dragons would look like, with exploration and combat all together. You would alternate between exploring. If swords get drawn, you resolve the combat, and then you go right back to exploring the world around you. So that about sums up everything you need to know to get started with Dungeons & Dragons. Bear in mind, there's a lot that I skipped in this video. This is a game with a surprising amount of depth. People have spent hours upon hours writing articles and making videos about Dungeons & Dragons, and including a few that have recorded themselves playing it with their friends. So, where do you go from here? Well, a good place to get started is to get everything you need and just start playing. But if you're a little unsure, you can find one of those videos I mentioned where someone is playing it with their friends. The choice is ultimately yours, adventurer.